Hello and welcome to the next section, Grouping for Aggregation, Filtration and Transformation. In this section, we will be defining an aggregation, grouping and aggregating with multiple columns and functions, and then removing the multiple index after grouping. We will also see how to customize aggregating functions with args and kw args. Next, we will examine the group by object, filter for states with a minority-majority, transform through a weight loss bet, and calculate weighted mean SAT scores per state with apply. At the end, we will explore about grouping by continuous variables, counting the total number of flights between cities, and also learn to find the longest streak of on-time flights. Let's take our first step by defining an aggregation. In this video, we will examine the flights dataset and perform the simplest possible aggregation involving only a single grouping column, a single aggregating column, and a single aggregating function. We will find the average arrival delay for each airline. Pandas has quite a few different syntaxes to produce an aggregation, and this video covers them. One of the most fundamental tasks during a data analysis involves splitting data into independent groups before performing calculation on each group. This methodology has been around for quite some time, but has more recently been referred to as split, apply, combine. This section covers the powerful group by method, which allows you to group your data in any way imaginable and apply any type of function independently to each group before returning a single dataset. Before we actually get started, we need to know just a little terminology. All basic group by operations have grouping columns, and each unique combination of values in these columns represents an independent grouping of the data. The syntax looks as follows. The result of this operation returns a group by object. It is this group by object that will be the engine that drives all the calculations for this entire section. Pandas actually does very little when creating this group by object, merely validating that grouping is possible. You will have to chain methods on this group by object in order to unleash its powers. The most common use of the group by method is to perform an aggregation. Now, the first question which may bother you is what actually an aggregation is. In our data analysis world, an aggregation takes place when a sequence of many inputs gets summarized or combined into a single value output. For example, summing up all the values of a column or finding its maximum are common aggregations applied on a single sequence of data. An aggregation simply takes many values and converts them down to a single value. In addition to the grouping columns defined during the introduction, most aggregations have two other components, the aggregating columns and aggregating functions. The aggregating columns are those whose values will be aggregated. The aggregating functions define how the aggregation takes place. Major aggregation functions include sum, min, max, mean, count, variance, standard deviation, and so on. Now that you are aware of the necessary basics, let's get our hands dirty. First of all, we read in the flights dataset. Next, define the grouping columns, aggregating columns and aggregating functions. What we have done is, we have placed the grouping column in the group by method and then called the agg method with a dictionary, pairing the aggregating column with its aggregating function. The syntax for the group by method is not as straightforward as other methods. Let's intercept the chain of methods in our previous step by storing the result of the group by method as its own variable. What we have in the output is a completely new intermediate object first produced with its own distinct attributes and methods. No calculations take place at this stage. Pandas merely validates the grouping columns. This group by object has an agg method to perform aggregations. One of the ways to use this method is to pass it a dictionary mapping the aggregating column to the aggregating function, as you can see in the highlighted part of the code. Alternatively, you may place the aggregating column in the indexing operator and then pass the aggregating function as a string to agg, so it returns the same result. Now, the string names used in the previous step are a convenience Pandas offers you to refer to a particular aggregation function. You can pass any aggregating function directly to the agg method, such as the numpy mean function, as we do in this line of code. Let's run it. Here the output is the same as the previous step. It's possible to skip the agg method altogether in this case and use the mean method directly. Again, we have the same result. If you do not use an aggregating function with agg, Pandas raises an exception. For instance, let's see what happens when we apply the square root function to each group. This time, it returns a value error exception stating that the function does not reduce. Here's a list of several aggregating functions that may be passed as a string to agg or chained directly as a method to the group by object.